I think any time when we come to these conferences, we hear a lot of theory. We get a lot of information that we have to try and assimilate. We have to try and figure out what it means to us and how do we apply it. But I think sometimes the stories that we really remember and often has the biggest impact on us are the real life stories. And so what I'd like to do now is invite Tiffany Simard up to the stage. Now, Tiffany regularly speaks with employees at Pinnacle Renewable Energy, and she'll be relating a personal story about a loss in the workplace that impacted her. Now, Tiffany's from Williams Lake, where she works at a holistic healing store. She's a mum of 3 kids, enjoys working as a cobbler on the weekends, and all that tells me is she's a very busy woman. So anyway, Tiffany, if you could join us up at the stage here, and please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you for having me. Just want to point out this is not my forte. I'm completely out of my element, so bear with me. December 4th, 1995, I made a phone call. And ultimately, it was a phone call that changed my life and that of my unborn son. So I'll take you back to that day. The day itself started out uneventful. My husband and I woke up in the morning and the phone was ringing. And it was the farm boss that worked on the ranch that we worked on. And he phoned in sick. And he asked Kelly if Kelly could run the tractor, that he needed to move some bales of hay as the cows kept breaking out and getting into this hay and making a big mess. And of course, Kelly said yes. It was my day off. And so he asked me if I wanted to go with him. And of course, I wanted to spend some time with him. We spent the day on the tractor. There was room for both of us, and ultimately moved all the hay, and it was about 4. And I told him I was going to go home and start dinner, something that I would normally do on my day off. And he said, "I'll see you soon. I'll be right there. I'm just going to park this tractor and we'll have dinner." So 6:15, dinner was cold. And I happened to look out my kitchen window, and I saw an ambulance driving by my house, and it was headed to town, and it was driving really, really slow. No sirens, just lights. I thought that was really odd. So I made that phone call at 6:30. And then the phone was answered by a woman, and the woman was screaming, he's dead, and she was hysterical. And I tried calmly to say, "Who's dead? What's happened?" And she said, "Kelly's dead." Well, I couldn't believe that that was even true, ultimately. But so I made another phone call, and I phoned the neighbor, and I asked her if she could kindly pick me up. I didn't think I was capable of driving. And she said she would, and she picked me up. We made our way to the hospital. It was cold, it was awful. It was a 25-minute drive, and we made it there, and she dropped me off at the emergency room, and I went in alone. I made my way to the ER station and was met by 2 nurses. And they obviously knew who I was, small town. And I asked them to take me to my husband, and they wouldn't take me. And they escorted me to what is called a quiet room. I'm sure you've all seen quiet rooms. So there I sat by myself in this quiet room, and finally the doctor came in and looked at me and asked if there was anybody that he could call. And I said, no, there was nobody. My family lived out of town, and I was alone. But I did think of somebody. I thought of my best friend's mom, who was actually a nurse on 2nd floor. So I asked if he would phone her, and I asked him to take me to my husband. And he said he couldn't quite yet. He said that, I asked him what had happened, was he all right, ultimately? And he said no. He said he was dead on arrival. And I stupidly said, I'm 5.5 months pregnant. And he said, I know. So finally, he took me to my husband in the trauma room. And it was awful. It was unbelievable. Something that I hope none of you ever have to see or experience. And finally, I I sat with him for hours. I felt like hours. It was a long time. And my friend's mom came, and she explained a lot of things to me, why he looked the way he looked, why the tube was in his mouth, and why he was so cold. So we were there for a couple hours and left. And she took me back to her house, and we were met there by police. It was 1995, and there were no cell phones. And Kelly's parents were traveling. His mom was in Mexico, and his dad was in the States. So we had the police involved, trying to locate everybody and get that organized. The days that followed were a blur. Arrangements were made, funeral arrangements were made, and people came and people went. And we had the funeral. And it was a few days after the funeral that I met with the coroner and a WCB officer and they informed me of what happened. And what had happened was Kelly had taken a 20-second shortcut, 20 seconds. Instead of putting the tractor that he was running in park, he put it in neutral. And in 20 seconds, that tractor built up compression and kicked itself into high gear. In that 20 seconds, he had gotten off the tractor, had lifted up a large shop door, gone into the shop. There was a young boy that was playing basketball in the shop. He had probably a 5-second conversation with him before that tractor blew through that door. It scooped him up and pinned him against the back of a dump truck and pushed that dump truck to the other end of the shop, ultimately killing him and leaving me widowed and pregnant. I remember thinking 20 seconds, how is that even possible? Kelly was an athlete. It wasn't, everything he did, he studied. He was a perfectionist. He was a professional bull rider. He river rafted. He studied the water. He studied the bulls. He was a horseman. He took clinic after clinic, everything he did, and he was young, but he took a 20-second shortcut. So I guess my story is to promise yourselves, promise your loved ones, your wives, your husbands, your children, especially your children, that you will never ever take a 20-second shortcut. 20 seconds left my son without a father and left me to raise him alone for a time being, because I obviously did remarry. But I have a son that has never met his father, has never heard his voice, has never felt his touch. And I tell you, it's awful. It's the worst possible thing ever. I have a son that lives with a ghost and my memories. So please go home tonight and make those promises to your loved ones. And thank you so much for having me and putting up with my wavering voice.